on the 23rd. Yeah, yesterday. The At 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, Rekieta and his wife and April Imholte, as I've discovered, his name is pronounced Imholte, were arrested for two different charges. All three were arrested for possession of a scheduled narcotic between schedules 1 and 5, and both of the Rekietas were charged with I forgot the name of it. A complicating charge. They had a firearm in possession or near the drugs, and so they have that as aggravating. They have an aggravating charge of a firearm possession while in possession of a controlled substance. These are not minor charges. The narcotics charge has a maximum sentence of 5 years and $10,000 fine. But the real scary one is the gun possession, and in combination with the drugs, because that has a minimum sentence of 3 years. Meaning, if they choose to charge him and they are found guilty, minimum sentencing. And minimum sentencing is done to prevent sympathetic judges from putting thugs or letting thugs out of jail and stuff. So the laws are that's like a tough on crime type of law. And it's not one that you want. It's very bad. So he's facing serious time, but I think you should very quickly, I think you should taper your expectations, because chances are, just because they're both family people, they have a bunch of kids that rely on them, and because this is a first offense, and I think they were at their home when they were arrested, what they're probably going to do is either allow them to plead out for just the felony, so they lose their guns, exactly like what they did with Ralph, and they'll probably put them on probation with supervised release for rehab or whatever with the drug charge. So let me just go through my notes real quick so I don't miss anything, because there's two parts to this. First of all, you've seen the mugshot. The thing I want to point out with that is he's wearing his mugshot. In this, he's wearing this fucking wife beater, and you can tell that's the Jamaican flag wife beater that he wore on all these disaster streams, and I think he bought it at Hedonism. So he's wearing the absolute trashiest thing that he could have possibly worn in his mugshot, and it really is just kind of amazing. How serendipitous it is that the Hedonism wife beater made it into the mugshot, because that's like a classic. It's like the Christian classic. If you were going to pick any Rekieta's clothes aren't necessarily something that is very particular to him, but the one that stands out in memory is the fucking Jamaican wife beater, because it just looks so trashy. He wears them on all those swinging streams too, when he's in the hot tub or whatever on his back porch with the Imholtz or whoever. He's always in this fucking trashy wife beater, so it's kind of amazing. Someone else looked at the house on on Google Maps, and as it turns out, Rekieta's house is on a street that's a dead end. So you have this really nice photo of the street signs that warning you that you're approaching a dead end. That's pretty funny as well. This led to a lot of speculation. I think one of the things that prompted the most speculation is just that, if I can pull this up, there was a very interesting thing where he and his wife and April were booked independently. Rekieta and April were booked at, as you can see here, at almost exactly 10 a.m., and then his wife was booked a full hour and a half later. And this led to a lot of rampant speculation as to what exactly happened. There was speculation that she was in the hospital first before they booked her. There was some speculation that they were, for instance, they had a DV and they pulled guns on each other. So it was Rekieta and April had a gun, and then she also had a gun, and they were both arrested separately. However, I think that the most likely outcome, knowing what I know now, is that they did not book Kayla until after she had contacted her their relatives, and found someone who on short notice could take 5 children in the middle of the morning on a Wednesday. It's well, what the fuck do you do? So I think that she was allowed to remain out of custody, like with the police supervising her at the house, as she made some very grim calls in the middle of the day to a bunch of horrified family members to try and figure out who could come in town to pick them up, and so on. So that's what I think happened. I think they were probably all three booked collectively for the same charges. It just so happened that her booking time is later because she was with the police officers for an hour and a half waiting for somebody to come out from out of town to pick up the kids. Really, really fucking grim. I think that was like the really terrible thing. It's like it's fun to make fun of Kayla and Rekieta for, I say Rekieta, they're both Reketas. Kayla and Nick for being like colossal fuck ups who just allowed this to happen. Like just literally allowed this to happen. As much as I like, I'm sympathetic to Kayla because I kind of feel like it was his idea the entire way, but she really didn't put her foot down. And I think that Mama Bear should have put her foot down at some point and be like, no, you're 40 and we've been married for 20 years, but you still have minor children under the age of 10. So you're going to put off the swinging and the hard drugs for another 12 years at least. And then after that, if you want to go fuck your life up in your 50s, you can go do that. But I am simply not permitting you to do that now. I think that if she had put her foot down more, there would have been a delayed reaching this stage would have taken some time. But she was definitely like along for the ride, as indicated by the charges that she has. And you can really tell just like with her picture. It's kind of like each picture tells like a different story. It's kind of interesting. I'll start with April. She's just like sad. She's 29 years old. You can tell she's got like puffy crying eyes. She's like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a fool. Rekieta, he has a black eye. And he had a black eye on his last stream. So the black eye wasn't one of the... I thought that was part of the incident, but it's not. He had a black eye on his stream before he got arrested. So somebody gave him a black eye. It's unknown who. And at this point, you might even speculate that it's one of his older sons who punched him in the fucking face. Or it could have been either of these people. It's unknown exactly who punched Rekieta. I just know that it was before he got arrested. But his face is like irritated. I can kind of just read his mind, and it says to me that he knows that this is going on the internet. So Rekieta, I think he here is mostly annoyed that this is going to like damage his internet reputation. That's just what it says to me. He's like cocky and irritated. Kayla looks fucking strung out. She looks terrible. I mentioned this with Pay, but in case you're wondering, that's a cherry blossom tree tattoo on her chest plate. I think that she's, if you don't remember, and I think this is kind of worth just going over the timeline so I can explain to you how my read on her face. It requires like a full explanation of like the timeline. So initially, early on, Rekieta got into, and I'm going to blame anime completely on this, just so you know, if you watch anime, this is your fate. He got into the anime stuff to try and pander more to the Vic Mignogna crowd. And he goes to these anime conventions, and there's like all these anime girls and cosplay girls that are like stepping on him at conventions. So I think, and she was along for that. One of the women stepping on him in that famous picture is Kayla. So she's complicit with that. And then he's like, oh, well, if she's not jealous when I'm being stepped on by other women. And then he opens up his locals chat. And in the locals chat, he has all these women who are like middle-aged. They called them the wine-aunts. All these wine-aunts in the locals chat that were like sending lewd images and like pictures of their tits and stuff to him through private messages. And so I think that then she noticing that her husband is like actively engaging these women in his private messages, she also starts participating. She starts posting like pictures of herself, and this is around the time, by the way, that Rekieta made that statement that my wife has 5 kids, her body is destroyed. And then sometime after that, she has cosmetic surgery. She has like a tummy tuck, and I think she also has a facelift. You can see how she kind of has like this frozen like surprise in her eyebrows, and that's a sign that they've pulled up the skin of the face, and it raises the eyebrows and gives you kind of more like, it gives you a more expressive look, but it also makes you look more surprised just in general. So I think that's a facelift. the okay, what was I saying? Okay, so she's like trying to like show off her body again, like in these messages, which also just continues to open the door for Rekieta. So now his wife is like actively competing with other women again, even though they've been married for 20 years. So then he's like, well, let's do some in real life exhibitionism. Let's go hang out in like pubs, and then let's go to like this hedonism event in Jamaica. It would be totally private, like far away from everybody we know. So they go to hedonism. And we know they went to hedonism because people in the Kiwi farms locked it down, like where they went, what country they were in. So let's see. Okay, I was going to bring up this. So this is the incident report, and the incident report is very interesting because it was on the 16th. So it was a full 7 days before the arrest, and it mentions all the charges against the two of them, or the three of them actually. And the really, really weird thing is this: the literal is possible child neglect or abuse, and the short description is mandatory reporting issue. I want to speak to an officer about, and this leads to a lot of speculation because there's a short list of things that are mandatory reporting in Minnesota. That is, broadly speaking, law enforcement and anybody who is involved in the criminal justice system. So it's not just police officers who are mandatory. Just so we're clear, a mandatory reporter is somebody who, if they see child abuse or different kinds of abuse, but broadly child abuse and vulnerable persons abuse, they have to report that to the police, or they can risk professional repercussions. So a police officer who's aware of child abuse and doesn't report it could lose his badge. A nurse could lose her nursing license. A doctor could lose his medical license. And so any kind of law enforcement officer, a probation officer, someone involved in the jail system, if they are aware of abuse, they have to report it. Doctors, nurses, psychologists, psychiatrists, they all have to report. And interestingly, clergy who learn about child abuse in the process of their ministerial duties have to also report. This, I've learned, is contested. The Church of Latter-day Saints has cited freedom of religion and won. So I think in some states it's been declared unconstitutional to have clergy be mandatory reporters. In Minnesota, it's still on the books. So even though you could possibly sue and win on religious freedom grounds, for the moment, it's still mandatory reporters. So the church seems like the most likely thing. You know, you have those kids coming in and out of church all the time. Actually, the 16th is a Thursday, so it's not a Sunday. But they do the micro schooling, so it could have been a thing. I don't know. They saw something, or I think the most likely situation is that even if it's not the church or it's just somebody else, I think that the most likely situation is that Rekieta was drunk driving and dropped off his kids in the presence of a mandatory reporter, who noticed that he was visibly intoxicated and driving, and so they felt compelled to report it. And I think that he drives drunk commonly enough, and probably drives with his kids, because he reports on his own that he drives like an idiot with his kids in the car. So is it a stretch to say that he's going to, because there's no way for him to drink the way that he does and then also fulfill his obligations and taking his children to the various places that they have to go as part of their micro-schooling arrangement. Especially considering that there's 5 of them. So it's not just one kid in a bunch of places to be, but 5 kids in a bunch of different places to be. And then he drinks continuously. So I believe that's probably what happened now, is that he DUI'd with his kids and somebody saw it and complained about it. If it's not that, then it's probably the clergy who reported it themselves. And that's my thought.